Thank you, Chair Boschko. And actually, DJ Moore, Latham and Watkins, on behalf of the California American Water Company. I'm introducing Rich Spindlin, the president of the California American Water Company, to start our presentation.
Good morning, honorable commissioners. Again, my name is Rich Spindlin. I'm the president of California American Water, and I've been working on this project for almost a decade. Actually, about 5 years ago, we were here talking about the test well.
Sorry to pause for a second. Our presentation actually didn't get loaded, so.
I was ready to go.
Okay. Are you okay to proceed?
I'm ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
So we've made every effort to design a project that satisfies the requirements of multiple state and federal agencies. Much like we did on the San Clemente Dam removal and Carmel River reroute project, where CalAm worked with the California State Coastal Conservancy and the National Marine Fisheries Services to develop, permit, and ultimately build a project to protect steelhead and other threatened species. I'm here today to tell you that our team, given the opportunity, will do the same for this project. This project is absolutely critical for the Monterey region's water supply, fishing habitat, and its economy. It also has an important environmental justice impact by providing water to Castroville, a 100% severely disadvantaged community. On this slide, the project is designed to address the severe water supply constraints facing the peninsula and to meet the community's demands in a sustainable way. The peninsula currently receives most of its water from the Carmel River and the Seaside Groundwater Basin. DJ Moore will go into a little more detail when he comes up, but essentially the State Water Board has ordered reductions on the Carmel River withdrawals, and the Seaside Groundwater Basin also faces cutbacks as part of the corridor reduction schedule. I'm proud to say that the per capita water use on the peninsula is already amongst the lowest in the state, but more conservation is not feasible. We have spent years working with local stakeholders and state resource agencies to find a water solution that meets their requirements. That solution, which the Public Utilities Commission unanimously approved as necessary to meet the region's water needs, is desalination. Contained in the box on this slide are two of the ordering paragraphs from the PUC. I know you can't read them, but basically it orders me to build a project that can deliver 14,000 acre feet per year. That's the PUC's finding. I am bound and obligated to meet that finding. This project provides a new desalination facility that will ensure a reliable, drought-proof water supply. The project also includes recycled water, not for storage components, but only the desal portion of this project is truly drought-proof. It's the only truly drought-proof supply that this region so desperately needs. There is an urgent need to approve this project swiftly. The State Water Board cease and desist order requires CalAm to complete the project and cease unauthorized diversions from the Carmel River by December 2021. Missing that deadline will result in mandatory supply cutbacks that will lead to rationing. All right, on this slide is a drawing of the slant well, which based on all the comments received is probably one of the main issues. So how did this come to be? First, CalAm, with the help of former Congressman Sam Farr, got every agency we could think of, including this commission and the city of Marina, to attend a meeting at our offices in Pacific Road in 2013. At that meeting, it was decided that the active mining area of CEMEX was the best place to install the subsurface intake. We built a test well that this commission approved unanimously, and that worked and delivered 2,000 gallons a minute for over 600 days. We designed this project around the successful test well, and we are found here before you to work on its approval. The source water for this project will be primarily seawater and some brackish groundwater drawn through subsurface pipelines, a desalination technology that minimizes marine impacts. So let me wrap up my slides by summarizing below. Our test well proves the project is feasible. We, along with the PUC, conducted extensive groundwater monitoring and modeling to show no harm to groundwater users. And perhaps most importantly, we defined upfront how the return water obligations would be calculated to ensure no users would be harmed. Our project complies with the ocean plan and has been acknowledged by this commission staff as the correct way to do desal in California. Virtually every impact has been mitigated, and if there remains items to work through, we are committed to do so. As stated in the staff report, we started off with a 9.6 mg desalination plant and provided an option to make it smaller. The PUC weighed all the evidence before it and ultimately ordered us to build a 6.4 mg desal plant. We understand that you and your staff have questions about the project, and we have our legal counsel and technical experts at your disposal. Our track record of working closely with regulated agencies, just like on San Clemente Dam, to address concerns and make changes cannot be questioned. Unfortunately, we do not believe we have yet been given the opportunity to do so in this process, but we remain more than willing to work with you and your staff to address the Commission's comments. We believe this is the right project at the right time, and that can be conditioned to comply with field structural permits and secure your approval. I'll now turn over this to GJ. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Good morning again, Commissioners. DJ Moore, Lakeland Watkins. As Rich mentioned, the project is needed to provide a replacement water supply that brings the Monterey Peninsula out of water scarcity and into water security. The peninsula has been subject to very strict water restrictions for over 20 years, resulting in water use being nearly cut in half since the 1980s. The peninsula has also been subject to a moratorium on new water connections for the last decade. The moratorium has essentially halted growth, preventing new development on existing legal lots, much needed affordable housing, additions to existing homes, and even conversions of existing businesses if the new business has a higher water demand. Hotels are even forced to send laundry out of the area to be washed, which is far from sustainable, costs local jobs, and is a tax on the tourism industry. CalAm has been working to find a replacement supply, as Rich mentioned, since 1995, when the State Water Board ordered CalAm to reduce Carmel River diversions. 2 river dam projects were attempted and both failed. Some form of desalination has been in the works here since 2004. In 2010, the PUC approved CalAm's participation in the regional desal project, which was proposed jointly with the Monterey County Water Resources Agency and the Marina Coast Water District. And it would have installed subsurface intake wells in this same area along the coast in Marina as to what's before you today. Unfortunately, the regional desal project failed when a Marina consultant violated conflict of interest laws, forcing CalAm to abandon that project. But the state board's order was still in place, and CalAm had to find a replacement water supply and move forward with the current project in 2012. After reviewing the project over 6 years through multiple evidentiary hearings, formal briefing, and oral argument, the PUC unanimously approved the project in 2018. The California Supreme Court denied challenges to that approval and the PUC's EIR earlier this year. The PUC's environmental process was extremely thorough. That process included engagement of 21 different agencies, including the Coastal Commission, and resulted in an over 13,000-page environmental document. The project will provide substantial benefits to the peninsula. It will provide a more reliable and sustainable water supply than any other existing or proposed source. It will provide water for 1/3 of county residents and will allow residential, commercial, tourism, and institutional activities to continue. It will also result in important environmental benefits to species and habitat due to the reduction in Carmel River withdrawals. The Public Utilities Code charges the PUC with the authority to set rates and determine utility system sizing. As part of that statutory mandate, the PUC conducted evidentiary proceedings with testimony from many parties and determined that CalAm's future water demand is approximately 14,000 acre-feet per year. The PUC also evaluated whether an expansion of the Pure Water Monterey project could satisfy that demand and determined it could not. The expansion plan also would not meet important water supply project objectives, such as providing the drought-proof water supply, improving water supply diversity, or supplying future development and economic expansion. Unlike the expansion plan, the project with desalination will advance water supply diversification on the peninsula. As shown on the left, historically the Carmel River has supplied about 3/4 of the peninsula's water. To improve reliability, the PUC approved a much more diverse portfolio. Desalination is only one component of that portfolio. Another is recycled water from the Pure Water Monterey project, the first phase of it, 3,500 acre-feet. If there's no desal, and if the expansion plan is approved, then Pure Water Monterey recycled water becomes the vast majority of the peninsula's water supply, just like the Carmel River has been. That's not diversification, and it would require Monterey One Water to commit contractually to providing the majority of the peninsula's water supply. Without desalination, the expansion plan also doesn't meet PUC-determined demand, and this slide pretty clearly shows that in the summer months of a drought year, there would be a substantial supply deficit. That means pulling more water off of the Carmel River with the continued steelhead impacts that would result. We're trying to find a new water source somewhere else. As the PUC determined, desalination is needed. This slide breaks down those numbers even more. As shown, the expansion plan would barely meet existing demand, and that's after years of conservation and water restrictions brought that down. An additional 4,000 to 6,000 acre-feet per year would be needed to cover any economic growth, any new affordable housing, or existing water entitlements. The PUC determined that the project is the best project to bridge that gap between supply and demand. It will consist of three main sources: an expansion of aquifer storage and recovery, as staff mentioned earlier, 3,500 acre-feet from the base Pure Water Monterey project, and an average of 6,750 acre-feet per year of desalinated water. The PUC's demand determination is reasonable. It's based on sworn testimony from many parties, including the Water Resources Agency, Marina Coast, CalAm, and many others, and accounted for many factors that included population growth, development of legal lots, water entitlements held by Pebble Beach, and tourism bounce back. The PUC also reduced the plant size that was mentioned before a few times to account for some of the recycled water from Pure Water Monterey, but importantly found that desal was still necessary. CalAm strongly disagrees with the staff report's claim that Pure Water Monterey expansion could serve as an alternative to desalination. The staff report's analysis largely repeats arguments that are made in a memorandum prepared by Monterey Peninsula Water Management District General Manager David Stoll, which was presented to that board and Coastal Commission staff. However, this memo suffers from numerous flaws, including that it repeats arguments that were specifically rejected by the PUC. In addition, the Stoll memo lacks citations and supporting evidence, has not been subject to any peer review, and does not comply with California statutory and regulatory requirements for determining water supply and demand for water utilities. On October 15th, almost 2 weeks before the staff report was released, CalAm provided to Commission staff a 26-page detailed response to the Stoll memo that walked through each of its improper assumptions and statements. We're extremely disappointed that our response was not discussed in the staff report. It's not included as an exhibit or in the supporter correspondence. We did make that request of Commission staff that has not been added to the record. We have provided it again this morning, so a hard copy should have been distributed to you. Further, the EIR for the expansion plan released last week has confirmed that the expansion plan is a backup plan in the event that the desalination plant is delayed, and it is not an alternative to desalination. I also wanted to note that the Coalition of Peninsula Businesses and the Pebble Beach Company provided responses refuting some key assumptions in the Stoll memo, and those responses also aren't addressed in the staff report. This is a list of each of the claims in the Stoll memo that were already considered and rejected by the PUC through its evidentiary proceedings. This includes the demand averaging that Mr. Luster advocated for in his presentation earlier. Nothing in these categories has changed, and these approaches weren't relied on by the PUC and should not be relied on by this commission. The Stoll memo also claims that the expansion plan would provide sufficient supplies to store enough water to cover the gap for a multi-year drought by 2034. That projection is based on a number of unrealistic assumptions, including that there is maximum aquifer storage production, which is something that's never happened, and that there is no drought between now and 2034, which is pretty unlikely given that there has been a multi-year drought in California in every single decade for the last century. In response to the Stoll memo, Monterey 1 Water even adopted a board resolution confirming that the expansion plan is only a backup and not an alternative to desalination. Relying only on the expansion plan would drastically reduce supply portfolio diversity. It would not satisfy demand, especially in drought years, and would put the peninsula at long-term risk because the expansion plan's source waters may be limited by future conditions. Those include drought, agricultural industry trends, higher levels of water efficiency that reduce waste, and increased conservation. This lack of supply will mean that the moratorium on new service connections in the peninsula is not going to be lifted, and that's going to keep the peninsula in continued water poverty. There is no guarantee that the expansion plan can be completed by 2021, which is the State Water Board's deadline for this Desal project. Given that the draft EIR for the expansion plan was just issued last week, no permits have been approved, a new water purchase agreement would need to be negotiated and approved by the PUC. Finally, the expansion plan is outside of the Coastal Act's alternative requirements, which direct the Commission to look at alternative locations, not completely different alternative projects that are completely outside of the Commission's permitting jurisdiction. We also disagree with the staff report's conclusions on environmental justice issues. CalAm takes these issues seriously. Regarding rates, the project's rates were approved by the PUC. That's the agency with the exclusive jurisdiction to determine utility rates. The PUC also considered environmental justice in the EIR and determined that there would be no disproportionate impacts. The staff report relies on water use assumptions that are extremely high, resulting in higher water costs under CalAm's average tiered pricing system. Average water users would have lower water rates than what it presented. The staff report also fails to mention CalAm's ratepayer assistance program, which provides 30% discounts for low-income customers. These individuals are in the low-income population per Coastal Commission guidance. Seaside was identified as a disadvantaged community in the staff report, and approximately 1/4 of Seaside households participate in this low-income program. Specifically, the staff report assumes a water use that's 30% higher than what CalAm's average customer uses, which artificially inflates water costs. The staff report also doesn't take into account the role of surcharges and fees that are outside of CalAm's control, such as water management district user fees, county franchise taxes, and PUC surcharges. Actual water charges are shown in the chart, excluding those fees and surcharges. The actual total bill increase if the project is implemented, and that includes desalination and 3,500 acre-feet from the first phase of Pure Water Monterey, would be about $37 for the average customer identified. The project has been designed with a very small footprint that would not impede beach access at the CEMEX site. Because the majority of the well components are underground, only 1/4 acre of the 400 acre CEMEX site will be fenced. Further, the use of the site for desalination has been contemplated for a long time in the Coastal Commission approved consent settlement for this site, which Marina also endorsed. The CEMEX site is currently not available for public access and is largely disturbed by existing sand mining operations. Once constructed, the wells would not block vertical or lateral beach access in the very limited area that they will take up on this very large site. The staff report also fails to recognize appropriately the project's community benefits, like providing a reliable source of water to Castroville, a 100% severely disadvantaged community that is running out of water and would otherwise be forced to drill expensive new wells that draw from a deep, non-renewable aquifer. The staff report also doesn't address how the peninsula would be able to meet its affordable housing requirements without a new and reliable water supply. The most recent regional housing needs assessment identifies a need for more than 450 very low and low-income units in CalAm's service district and many more market rate units. But there is no water to accommodate those new connections without the project. That affordable housing cannot be built, reducing coastal access opportunities for low-income families. The project would also support an increase in visitor serving accommodations, which would facilitate coastal access, enhance the local economy, and further Coastal Act and Marina LCP policies encouraging such uses. With respect to ESHA, the EIR determined that there would be no significant physical ESHA impacts with mitigation and prohibited work during the snow and plover season without Fish and Wildlife approval. boxes in this image just represent the limited well site footprint on the site. The staff report does confirm that special conditions could address any additional measures that are needed to ensure coastal ESHA compliance. Regarding coastal hazard and coastal waters, the analysis using the Commission's recent sea level guidance, as Mr. Lester mentioned, confirms the wells will not be affected by coastal erosion during their lifetime. There is a new concern raised about sand burial, but the staff report does confirm that that also could be conditioned to avoid potential coastal act inconsistency. With respect to coastal waters, the staff report raises concerns about the impact of Monterey Water's outfall lining work. That work is not part of this application and could be separately conditioned when an application is submitted to that project. Regarding ocean plan compliance, the EIR requires CalAm to perform water quality assessments prior to and during operations to ensure that brine discharge complies with all ocean plan standards. Finally, groundwater is an important issue for this project. It always has been, and it has undergone years of analysis and modeling.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but you're running low on bubble time.
Understood.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The data modeling showed that the project will not adversely affect water supply, groundwater quality either. Marina's concerns about groundwater supply are unfounded and were rejected by the PUC and the California Supreme Court. There are no municipal supply wells that would be affected by the project. The best available science shows the project will not cause seawater intrusion and may actually prevent or slow future intrusion. The staff report released last week by the Commission's independent hydrogeologist confirms the project will not cause further seawater intrusion. Some project opponents have argued that the project's wells will draw fresh water. Those claims are based on one study that did not take any actual groundwater samples and were rejected by the PUC. The Coastal Commission's independent hydrogeologist report also confirms that the study does not present any new information not already considered in the EIR. On the other hand, CalAm has taken samples from more than 20 monitoring wells since 2015. The data confirms this water is not fresh and cannot be put to beneficial use without desalination. In conclusion, the project is the right project at the right time. CalAm has complied with resource agency directives and has designed this to be an environmentally sound desalination project. The project will not harm groundwater basin, the groundwater basin, or groundwater users, and the State Water Board has confirmed that CalAm will develop water rights through putting the water to beneficial use. The project is located on a site that has been identified for desalination use for years and will not result in disproportionate adverse impacts to disadvantaged communities. ESHA, public access, and other impacted areas can all be addressed by working through special conditions with staff. We thank you for your time today. I'll reserve the remaining time for rebuttal.
Thank you. That'll be about 7.5 minutes.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm John Phillips. I'm the County Supervisor for Monterey County and Chair of the Board, and more importantly, I'm the representative on M1W. My district is the area where I've lived for 50 years, includes the town of Castroville, an extremely disadvantaged community that is hampered by saltwater intrusion. The Desal project will provide much needed, reliable, fresh, potable water for Castroville and the surrounding areas, but that will not happen if staff recommendations follow. I throw that in for the environmental justice issue. The staff report concludes that based on a recent unverified and factually unsupported water demand analysis, that pure water expansion will now provide sufficient water to meet the water demands for the entire Monterey Peninsula. It's clear now that the Coastal Commission staff based this conclusion to a large extent on Exhibit 10 to your staff report, which consisted of portions of our agency's 56-page draft hydrology report. Mr. Stoltz of the Water Management District has now confirmed that he cut and pasted 3 pages out of our agency's 56-page draft report and added language to appear as part of the record. In my 45 years in public service, I never heard of that being done. But based on that, Exhibit 10, the Coastal Commission staff concluded that pure water expansion is now a feasible, well-developed alternative. This is in spite of the fact that our agency has not endorsed expansion. Indeed, the draft environmental impact report is just now being released to the public comment. And the CPUC rejected expansion as an alternative, as did our agency. It was only after the Water Management District approached our agency offering to pay for the cost of the EIR that we agreed to proceed with the EIR expansion. Because our concerns of how any expansion might be utilized in this highly charged water, we approved moving forward an expansion strictly under the condition that expansion was to be considered only as a backup project in the event the Desal project was delayed, not stopped. It was never intended to be a replacement. I know because I made the motion. This backup position was recently relit by the others. And I got to say, we have a real concern, members on my board have a real concern about the viability of this project. And I know because we just, my water resource agency that I wear the hat on, we're having a legal matter now on whether we can reserve and what we're going to do about dealing with the resource agency. Did I get a full 3 minutes? I did. So there's a number of people on our agency that have a real concern about the viability of expansion. Thank you.
Good day, Commissioners. My name is John Gagliardi. I'm a Monterey 1 board member, a Seaside Basin Water Master board member, a Fort Ord Reuse Authority board member, and most importantly, Delray Oaks City Council member, raising the third generation Delray Oaks residents in the house that I grew up in. I was also a utility scale wind farm and solar farm developer, and so I'm into infrastructure. I read the staff report. I think that it was very well written. However, as well written as the report is, I believe it's fundamentally flawed in the area of feasibility and viability with regard to the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. The Monterey 1 board has not completed our diligence to determine feasibility of the expansion project. We've not yet put the first gallon of water into the basin from our first project. An area the staff did not evaluate with regard to our project are the terms and conditions of the future water purchase agreement. That may not be something that's important to the Coastal Commission, but it's something that's very important to utility board members. The current Pure Water Monterey water purchase agreement allows for forgiveness and production shortfalls, and that's because it was always expected to be backed up by a firm, drought-proof solution. If that firm backing goes away, that will completely change our risk and liability profile. That's something that has not been deliberated by our board, yet it's been assumed by others outside our board that we'll just sign on to it. Another concern that was touched on in the staff report, which I don't feel has been adequately studied with regard to our project, is the impacts of groundwater recharge and use with regard to climate change, or due to climate change. Those impacts are happening now. I've seen them myself just in the short lifetime of my young children. And the pace and the severity of those impacts is only increasing. It's accelerating. It's not slowing down. Those impacted groundwater flows will ultimately be our inflows. ASR and recycled water both use groundwater supply and use. If the desal plant goes away, we become the critical system. And pitting a critical system on a diminishing input is not just good infrastructure planning. Promises and obligations regarding the expansion project are being made for us, and quite frankly, that's nobody's role but ours. We have not finished our first project. We are just starting the diligence on the expansion project, and yet we're being given a lot of credit for success we get to deliver. In closing, with all due respect, Commissioners, I don't know how decisions and justifications can be made on our project without having the full confidence and commitment of our board. And with regard to project feasibility and viability, that's something that's not settled yet amongst us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Commission members. I'm Eileen Sobek. I'm the Executive Director of the State Water Resources Control Board. Thank you for the opportunity to present our views here today. As I think you've heard reference to the State Water Board's interest in this matter, the need for a new water supply project has been well known to our board for quite a long time. By virtue of CalAm's long-standing water rights violations and the need for CalAm to comply with the cease and desist orders issued by the State Water Board. It made its initial determination, we the State Water Board, in 1995 after an extensive examination or investigation and an adjudication by the board that CalAm had been illegally diverting over 10,000 acre-feet of water per year, and that these diversions constituted the largest single impact to the Carmel River in-stream beneficial uses and public trust resources, including riparian habitat and impacts on fish species, including steelhead. This resulted after several not successful efforts to curb these unlawful diversions, with the entry of an initial State Water Board cease and desist order in 2009. CalAm made some progress in delivering some fish habitat and fish recovery projects, but large-scale water replacement projects were not successful during the period of that initial CDO. And in 2016, the board, as the existing cease and desist orders deadline approached, the state board amended its order granting CalAm 5 additional years until December 2021 to cease all unlawful diversions from the Carmel River. In the meantime, they must comply with the requirements and restrictions in the CDO. Is that 2 minutes? Yes. I just want to raise 2 concerns of our staff. That one is that demand under all required circumstances is problematic in our view in the staff recommendations. We believe that staff determination is contrary to the robust publicly vetted process of the CPUC and is based on very limited, not widely publicly vetted information that needs additional robust review. And we also question the timelines that are set up for additional process. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Jason Rieger. I'm from the California Public Utilities Commission. We're here today because your staff thought it would be prudent if we were present and available for any Q&A you have, and we are. I want to make it clear that the California Public Utilities is not a proponent or opponent of this project. We have no recommendation about what the Coastal Commission should do and the choices before it. However, we are very confident and we do stand by the decision that we made in our processes. And I want to use my time to talk a little bit about what our processes were to get there. CalAm came in for a certificate of public necessity and convenience. That is a very due process heavy review. It took us over 6 years at looking at this issue. We had CEQA documents, we had NEPA documents, we had evidentiary hearings, days of evidentiary hearings, opening briefs, reply briefs, oral arguments, we had cross-examination under oath. We had multiple parties before us with multiple positions, and we did the best we could to truth test those positions through the processes that we have. Essentially evidentiary hearings, legal briefs, comments on decisions. We also had public participation hearings, and I could frankly go on. Ultimately, the Commission found that 14,000 acre-feet per year was the demand that was the most prudent number to choose. And ultimately, the Commission found that it did not have enough concrete evidence before it to opine upon the pure water expansion. It did opine that it thought the expansion work to go forward was not enough water to meet the demand without the Desal plant too. And in weighing all of those things before it, costs, environmental impacts, community values, economic justice, it found the most prudent thing was to offer CalAm a certificate to build a 6.4 MGD Desal plant. And we are here for your convenience as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments regarding CalAm's project. My name is Paul Michel, and I'm the superintendent for Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. We are the federal trustee agency for this marine protected area under NOAA. We appreciate that there's no vote occurring today, as this will provide an opportunity to have discussions with various agencies on the Commission's staff report and findings and the final NEPA-CEQA document for the project. I thought I would just give you some background for your consideration. In 2010, NDMS, the National Marine Fisheries Service, and California Coastal Commission produced guidelines for desalination plants to ensure that future desal plants that are adjacent to the sanctuary are properly sited, designed, and operated to avoid damaging impacts to the marine environment. In short, the guidelines emphasize intake of seawater via subsurface technologies, discharge via existing outfall infrastructure, unless water recycling or conservation measures are deemed feasible to provide the needed water. NPDMS staff used these guidelines as well as the requirements under the State Ocean Plan Amendment in 2015 to evaluate CalAm's proposed desal project in a joint EIR-EIS with the Public Utilities Commission. We work closely with the CPUC and our consultant team to ensure that the final EIR-EIS identified all potential impacts and met all levels of NEPA sufficiency. It was reviewed by NOAA General Counsel, and it was issued in March 2018. As the final EIR-EIS states, the impacts for the entire project would be reduced to less than significant levels through mitigation measures, but for other terrestrial impacts and indirect short-term impacts. We believe the conclusions of the final EIR-EIS demonstrate the validity of the desal guidelines. The joint NEPA-CEQA document concluded that the project could be implemented with less than significant environmental impacts with mitigation. In summary, we've worked really closely with our state and federal agencies on the EIR-EIS, endeavoring to develop a document that was robust. We look forward to discussing any areas of inconsistency with Coastal Commission and other agency staff, as well as working on any additional studies that might be needed. Thank you.
Eric Tynan, I'm the General Manager of the Castroville Community Services District. We found the report completely flawed. It's based on one district that's trying to take over, doing a hostile takeover of CalAm and needs to desal, but I think they're more problematic. As far as environmental and social justice, they show on page 71, Castroville is the most distressed community, and they never came to talk to us. They never said a word. They went and talked to the people in distressed communities that opposed it, but they didn't talk to anybody who supported it. They also don't mention the $2.8 million we have to come up with to tie into the system. And as far as justice goes, why are we taking their proposal, 5,000 acre feet, to treat it, send it to the Peninsula, and do nothing for our critically overdrafted basin? Right next to Marina, right now, they've dropped about the equivalent of 7 Castrovilles on Marina's water supply. The Armstrong Ranch pumps 5,000 acre feet for the strawberry fields that were pastured. Marina's real threat is there, and it's not the desal. Their wells in the 400 are 5 miles in. Castroville's wells are in the 400 are 2 miles in. So I would strongly advise Marina to start really looking at where the water's coming from. Because I've seen their records, it's based on their data. In 2011, they got 30% of their water from the deep, right? Today they get 70% or more. So they're getting 70% of the water right next to a giant development, 7 Castrovilles, 5,000 acre feet. And what do they want to do? They want to send 5,000 acre feet of the critically overdrafted Salinas Valley Basin and send it to the Peninsula. Go down Highway 1 and look at how many people have to go from Castroville to go do service jobs on the Peninsula because they can't get a place to live there because there's water restrictions. It's high time to do this. There's always going to be an alternative. There's always going to be people trying to block it. I mean, public water now, they don't want growth. And they don't want people like Castroville living in their community. So, Marina people need to wake up, find out where they're getting their water from. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Paul Bruno. I'm the chairman of the Seaside Groundwater Basin Water Master. I've served on that board for nearly 14 years. Our board considered the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project that is before you and passed a resolution in support of this project. It's in your packet. The Water Master is tasked by the court to administer the Seaside Basin. Our board is comprised of elected officials and others. Represented are the County of Monterey, the cities of Monterey, Seaside, Sand City, and El Reyes, the water company, the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, and 2 public representatives. To protect the Carmel River, our basin is heavily relied upon, so much so that it's now overdrafted and at risk. This will not go on forever. There are preset production ramp downs. Moreover, the natural safe yield used by the court may be subject to further reduction. It is the opinion of the Water Master that the proposed desalination plant is the only project before us that will protect the Seaside Basin and ensure that protected water levels are maintained along the coast. A portion of the plant's production is committed to replenishing the Seaside Basin. There's been a lot of talk about the expansion of Pure Water Monterey. I'm very hesitant to use the word, quote, project, because at this point it's only an unvetted idea with questionable source water. In fact, there's much controversy about how it became so heavily relied upon in the Commission staff report, so much so that the board of Monterey 1 has now been walking it back. Let me be clear. It is not an alternative to the desal plant. The expansion will do nothing to help the Seaside Basin. There just isn't enough water available from it. Members of the Monterey One Board have already said that if the desal plant is not approved, water for their expansion will first have to go to disadvantageous communities like Castroville and others that are like it that are within the overdrafted Salinas Basin. We need a reliable water supply. We need a real project, not another distraction. I've been involved in local water supply issues for close to 30 years. Every time we get close to a solution, someone points over the rainbow and says, look, there's an alternative. We never get there. Please approve this.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Gary Curcio. I'm a public elected official serving on the Board of Directors of the Monterey Peninsula Water District. I deliver these comments today on behalf of all of those in our community who are in strong support of the desal portion of the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. We have in good faith over the last 7 years attended workshops, public hearings, and too many meetings to count. Today, your Commission is holding an informational hearing on a project critical to our community's future well-being. We commend the Commission for recognizing there are key unanswered questions about alternatives to desal and the validity of supply and demand numbers. Thank you for taking the time to get this critical decision right. Currently, you have a staff report recommending that the Monterey Peninsula not be allowed to proceed with desal, instead relying on an alternative source of water from a pure water Monterey expansion that has just in the last week released a draft supplemental environmental impact report. A key is whether that the DSEIR identified and examined in scope of work pure water Monterey and the pure water expansion could wind up being a source of nearly 60% of the peninsula's water supply. Your staff was recommending an alternative source with many more unanswered questions than the desal project it recommends against. We have a real concern that this alternative water source may not be available. There are many unanswered questions about completing demands on the source water for pure water expansion. The agricultural industry in Salinas Valley and the Board of the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin Sustainable Agency are key players that must be consulted and listened to before any final decisions about pure water Monterey expansion can be reached. Availability of source water could be the Achilles heel of the pure water expansion project. Your staff also relied on a demand and supply report authored by Dave Stolt of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. It is important to recognize that this report has had just one public presentation. There has been no vote by the Water Management District Board to adopt, modify, or reject the findings of the report. Your staff's current recommendation has a long list of unanswered questions. We ask that you be confident the Commission and staff will continue to vote when we have fully recognized this. We will be present when your Commission has all of this vetted and verified. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mo Amar, and I'm the President of the Pacific Grove Chamber of Commerce, and I've been there for 28 years. I'm the longest serving President of a chamber on the Central Coast. And I've been a resident of Pacific Grove for over 30 years. And we represent 410 businesses, predominantly small mom-and-pop type businesses. Those businesses have not been able to expand due to all the restrictions and the limitations on water. We are in favor of slant wells that's been mandated by the Coastal Commission. The planning process which I've been involved in is over 10 years. This is a project that's been approved by the CPUC. And to come at the 11th hour with a proposal that's going to be different and better, to me is unsustainable. Desal is the only drought-resistant option that is diverse. On a personal note, my son and his family live with me. My daughter and her family live with me. So we're a total of 9 in a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, and I can't add half a bathroom. So I consider myself disadvantaged and underprivileged, and I need that half bathroom. And I really believe desal is the only way to go. I turn the microphone to my colleague, Peter Montiel here.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your attention. My name is Peter Montiel. I'm also with the Pacific Grove Chamber of Commerce. As you consider your decision on this permit, some local history might be helpful. The Water Management District was established in 1978 to find a new water supply, and they have struggled to do so ever since. Monterey Peninsula mayors grouped together as the Regional Water Authority to give citizens a seat at the table when it comes to determining a new supply. A consensus was reached around the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project with desal. For years, our community has faced stringent restrictions on water supply that have necessitated drastic water conservation measures and limited economic growth. Residents can't have bathrooms, as most said. Businesses can't convert a space into a use that would require more water, and you can forget about affordable housing. Level of regulatory issues and our supply challenges necessitate is sometimes hard to believe. I saw a business struggle to open a space because they had to truck in ice from Santa Cruz an hour away because they couldn't install an ice machine because it would take water that they couldn't get. They trucked in 2 to 3 times a week, 1 hour each way. I'm not anti-regulation. Of course, we need to manage our resources. We need rules to do it. But with the CDO looming, we also need water, and we need more of it now. Customers have become state leaders in water conservation because of these issues, but conservation alone can't replace the shortfall between available supplies and future demand. This project provides that supply. There is no alternative that will meet demand, especially during drought years, and we can't address our other pressing issues without it. After 9 years, we're as close as we've ever been, and we hope to work with you to get it across the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Dobby. About 4 minutes, followed by Jennifer Savage, who will have 4 minutes as well.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Jeff Dabby, and I'm the co-chair of the Coalition of Peninsula Businesses, as well as a third-generation resident for the Monterey Peninsula, born and raised there. The coalition consists of the Monterey County Hospitality Association, the Monterey Commercial Property Owners Association, the Monterey Peninsula, the Carmel, and the Pacific Grove Chambers of Commerce, the Monterey County Association of Realtors, the Associated General Contractors, the Monterey Division, the Pell Beach Company, and the Community Hospital of Monterey. Over 36,000 employees under those organizations. As I said, a third-generation resident of the Peninsula. I also happen to have been the commissioner for the real estate department of the state of California for about 7 years. So I know a little bit about housing, and the Desal plant will help us to provide much-needed housing in our community. I'm very pleased that the commission staff decided to delay a decision today, and that in fact it's made this an informational hearing. That decision, I think, is because we're just not ready. There is too much at stake, and I don't believe we have all the facts in front of us. Much of the staff report recommending denial gave credence to a Monterey Peninsula Water Management District memo that's been talked about this morning. I call it the scope memo about supply and demand. This memo was never voted by the board. It was never approved by the board. It was information item only that they received. And it's been brought forward, and it's very much part of the staff report recommending denial. There were reply and response letters from the coalition, as well as a very involved response from the CalAm American Water Company. Those documents don't appear anywhere in the staff report, and it appears as though it was ignored. I would hope in the next report, when this comes back in March, those things would be considered duly to make sure that the supply and demand memo is held accountable. Our community has always been in support of a 3-pronged approach for the solution to our water problems. That includes aquifer storage, recycling water, and this desal plant. Now suddenly, we're being asked to change this and support something totally different. Even the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District, whose 2 board members came here today and spoke against the desal project, have an on-the-record position supporting the desal project. I want to read you excerpts from a subcommittee meeting at the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District when they considered sending you a letter for this hearing. They had 4 or 5 options. A letter of support for desal. The second option was this, a letter saying, in its reply brief of January 9, 2018 to the California Public Utilities Commission, the Water Management District expressed its support for the 6.4 MGD desalination plant. To date, the district has not officially changed its position. Or a letter saying, the district's public statements about the community being able to afford missing a State Water Resource Control Board milestone were not intended to reflect a lack of support for the desalination project, or a letter rescinding support for the project, or send no letter. They chose to send no letter, so they didn't change their position at all. The slant walls were tested in the direction of this body, and that's a very important process many years ago. The Pure One Water expansion is not a project, it's a concept. It hasn't been approved, the EIR just came out. So we can't abandon a project for a concept. It's worth looking into, but it's not going to solve our problem. And my final point, I've lived in that community for all my life. I have seen this community come this close to a water solution 3 times in the last 40 years. In the 80s, it was the dam, twice for Desal. Every time we get close to the finish line, someone says, no, we gotta wait for something else. I am convinced the Monterey Peninsula has performance anxiety when it comes to solving its water problems. I beg you to help us move forward and get this Desal plant built. Thank you very much.
I'm here on behalf of the Village Project. I'm the Reentry Services Case Manager for the Village Project. And I will be reading a letter specifically written by Ms. Regina Mason of the Village Project. This letter is being written to recommend that you support the above referenced project. I regret that I am unable to speak before you in person due to a prior commitment. I am fortunate to have the person before you read my letter. I am a lifelong resident of the city of Seaside, California, and a descendant of a retired and now deceased military father. My father fought in 2 wars for the Americans and would enjoy the freedoms of our country. I am also from a group, African American, that has been marginalized in this country and in our city. I implore you today to vote in favor of the water supply project that has marginalized the people and has to change it, and people have the chance to live the American dream. I have resided in Seaside all my life and have seen firsthand the out-migration of the African American population followed by rapid gentrification of the community. Many of the peers I grew up have had to leave the community due to lack of jobs, affordable housing, and racism. This was by design. My community suffered an economic downturn for over 25 years, beginning with the closure of the former Fort Ord. I witnessed firsthand businesses closing, unemployment of residents, drug addiction, depression, adverse health outcomes, lack of additional water supply will allow for well-planned development on land belonging to Seaside. This new water supply would allow for the development of affordable workforce and low-income housing, as well as innovative businesses that would fuel economic development that create jobs. In this report, the creation of any plan, in this case, increased water supply that will serve to increase economic and social opportunities for African Americans and other marginalized population of people is a civil rights issue. Those who oppose this project claim to do so because of environmental concerns. Need I point out that marginalized people who suffer a myriad of social and economic ills are also a part of the environment. By contrast, the more affluent communities of Monterey, Carmel, Pacific Grove, and Pebble Beach are afforded water credits that allow them to have bathrooms per home, more bathrooms per home than Seaside. Increased development that continues to occur in these communities are not opposed by the same forces who are opposed to this project. Their argument in opposition to this project are without merit. Their primary reason for opposing this project is to prevent development, especially development that will produce positive outcomes for Seaside and its marginalized population, especially African Americans. This is yet another form of racism and social exclusion. Some time ago, I spoke before the Public Utilities Commission in favor of the distillation of plant using the same argument. These commissions voted in favor of the project. I urge coastal commissioners to look more broadly at this matter, taking into account the implications of my community, and vote to support this project.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Chris Chiplock. I am the current chair of the board of the Monterey County Hospitality Association. We are the voice of hospitality in Monterey County. MCHA represents over 25,000 employees. We are a $2 billion industry per year and are responsible for over $75 million in tax revenue for our cities and counties. The Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project, size at 14,000 acre-feet, will provide 500 acre-feet of water for our industry's ongoing recovery from the Great Recession. This water for tourism bounce back is absolutely essential and is only provided by the full portfolio of source at this project, including Desal. But you know, to us, it's much more than this. Jobs and housing are two of the big social issues of our time. It is no longer acceptable that many, if not most of our great employees, have to travel many miles on typical California highways that more resemble parking lots. I see them every morning and every evening, spending hours and hours at time away from their families because of the lack of housing and water on the Monterey Peninsula. Apparently they can work there, they just can't live there. Too often in the great state of California, we kick the can down the road. Our roads, the infrastructure is not working. Let's today think not of only the present, but of future generations. I don't understand the 10, 20-year plans. We need a generational solution to our water problem. The time for more debate, proposals, and false starts are over. CalAm's water supply project has been extensively reviewed with countless public meetings and hearings. On behalf of 25,000 hard-working hospitality employees of Monterey County, please approve this project and support our community's water future. Thank you.
Renee Moskow from MCHA as well. Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate your time. Our industry still supports the Desal plant, and here's why. The current proposal from staff suggests that Pure Water Monterey will create enough supply to meet future demand. The critical flaw in this approach is that the Farm Bureau and the Mayor of Salinas have made it crystal clear that we cannot rely on their wastewater in perpetuity. And that if at any time in the future, if the Farm Bureau or Salinas has a need for their own wastewater, they can repurpose the wastewater at any time. This would leave the peninsula short of water again, and we would be right back where we started 10 years ago. The CPUC EIR recognized this fact and consequently stated that Pure Water Monterey can be a supplemental source of water, but cannot be a substitute for the Desal plant. Please keep this in mind when you make your decision next quarter. Thank you.
My name is Jerome Karras, and I'm the chairman of the commission. This project is critically needed to meet the peninsula's long-term water supply needs. It provides a new, local, reliable, drought-proof water supply. The project will protect and promote the Monterey region's economy by providing a path for lifting the moratorium on new service connections for the very first time since 2010, benefiting the economy and providing opportunity for new housing. The project will also support the recovery of the tourism industry, the main economic driver for the Monterey area, which will benefit everyone in the Monterey Peninsula. I represent a business in the city of Marina with 109 associates. I'm a resident of the city of Marina. I'm also the incoming chair of MCHA, which, as you know, has over 25,000 associates, of which 70+% reside in the peninsula. The benefits of this project are very clear. We ask that the Commission approves CalAm's application for a coastal development permit at the earliest opportunity. Thank you.
But good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Chris Smith. I'm the Government Affairs Manager for the Associated General Contractors of California, or AGC, and we are here to oppose the staff recommendation and support the CalAm project. AGC represents the full spectrum of the construction industry. We have about 1,000 members statewide, including general, sub, and specialty contractors. Our members are both union signatory and open shop members who work on projects ranging from under $100,000 to over $100 billion. And we believe that the construction industry is vital to the success of the Monterey Peninsula. This area needs water from a reliable source that is drought resistant, carries local control, and is operationally flexible in case of emergency or natural disaster. The CalAm project does this for the community. Additionally, this plant will generate a long-term insurance plan of water supply while improving the environmental impact byway. The plant will bring the peninsula an environmentally conscious project that improves the water quality and growth for the area. We encourage this body to accept the permit to give the Monterey residents and the business community a steadfast water supply that it desperately needs. Thank you so much for your time. We hope you do approve the application.
Thank you.
My name is Fred Muir. I'm the chairman of the Monterey Bay Defense Alliance. Our objective is to protect and enhance the mission capability of the military missions in Monterey, that many of you probably don't even know exist. But it's a $1.2 billion economic engine that is vitally important to our national security. And the day in, day out operational capabilities of our forces deployed across the United States. These defense activities in Monterey are critical to national security. These missions require a water supply that can meet today's missions and can meet any growth in mission that is dictated by changes in our adversarial capability. And those adversaries are gaining on us every day. That's why these schools, these research labs, and these activities that give us the ability to put weapon systems in the right place at the right time are so terribly important. Hope is not an acceptable strategy in the military. Hope is also not an acceptable strategy for sizing our future water supply. Right now, we are hoping, if you look at the record presented by the Water Management District, that we don't have a drought until 2034. That's probably a problem. We're also hoping that there will be a sustainable feed water supply from the Salinas Valley that is severely overdrawn right now. Those folks are going to need that water for themselves. The CUP appropriately determined the region's demand through application of weather and climate science, responsible engineering standards, and environmental review, and applicable state codes. The project portfolio is planned and sized to meet that water demand. The portfolio must include desalination, to be drought-proof, and to provide the resiliency if any of the other components fail, either due to mechanical malfunction or loss of source water. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, good afternoon. My name is Frank Geisler. I'm the CEO of the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, representing 600 businesses employing over 25,000 residents. Many of them you see on Highway 1 coming and going because they can't afford to afford a house on the peninsula. The primary goal of the Chamber of Commerce has always been to assure a long-term water supply for the peninsula that is sufficient for future build-out on each community general plan and is based on a diversified portfolio of water supply projects, including desal, reclaim, ASR, and conservation. As your commission continues to consider the decision on slant wells, we also would like to remember the following facts. Number one, the State Water Resource Control Board Ocean Plan required the test of the slant wells, as did the State Lands Commission, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and your commission too. So in good faith, CalAm designed, installed, and tested a slant well. They installed numerous monitoring wells to detect any potential negative impacts on adjacent groundwater sources. After years of testing, the slant well was successful. There was no negative impact detected in the monitoring wells. So the requirement for continual regulation and testing of the water will determine the amount of return water to be sent back to the Salinas Valley. This return water is currently the only optional water supply that would allow the disadvantaged community of Castroville to cease pumping from wells contributing to the seawater intrusion problem. This benefit must be given consideration. Thank you very much.
My name is Paul Kelly, and I'm here representing CalDesal. We're a statewide association that promotes and defends and works towards desalination and salt nutrient management. And I'm here on behalf of that organization to encourage you to approve this application by CalAm for their desalination project. Desalination is a key component of water supply portfolio in many areas within our state. Here in the Monterey area, it is very key considering the elements of recycled water, ASR, and the other projects that are going on. This project is the best environmentally sensitive project to come before you, and my association is concerned that if you're unable to approve this, can there be any approved in California? I hope that you will listen to your staff of your other agencies when you go back and take a review before you make your decision. We are big fans of recycled water, and recycled water is an important component of a water supply portfolio. The reality is, when the glass is empty, you cannot recycle anything. So it needs an input, and it needs a consistent, drought-resilient input, and this project can supply that for the community here in Monterey. I encourage you to approve their project when it comes before you. Thank you.
For the record, Carlos Ramos. Yo he sido voluntario en el condado de Monterrey por más de 25 años y he estudiado junto con muchos de las comunidades este problema, este reto, esta oportunidad del agua. Pero estoy aquí para apoyar la empresa CalAm. I've been a volunteer on the Monterey Peninsula for over 20 years. I lived there for 30. And myself and many networks and organizations have been studying this issue. And for over 20 years, I have been listening to and studying and now supporting the California American Water Project in Monterey County. I have two letters that I will submit. One from the Latino Water Use Coalition. I'm not going to read through it, but to place it on the record. And from the Latino Seaside Merchants, which covers Latino businesses from Big Sur on the south part of the peninsula, all the way to Marina. So I assure you that there's sides to everything. There's a saying in Spanish, cada cabeza, every head, un mundo, a world in itself. But you have the facts, or should have the facts, as it was pointed out by a county supervisor, John Phillips, and by the water representative, Eric Tyson, about the community of Castroville, which we have members of our coalition, that the need is there. And for anyone to say that they only speak for, and I have it quoted there, and you have it recorded, that they represent everyone, please. We support CalAm. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, Commissioners, and thanks for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Miranda Taylor, board member of the Carmel River Steelhead Association. Recently, the general manager of the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District wrote a paper titled "The Supply and Demand of the Water on the Monterey Peninsula." Based on this paper's assumption, I'm here representing to say that I don't believe that they can stop pumping from the Carmel River by the allotted time frame. We are adamantly disagreeing with the overall premise of the paper. And if the assumptions in the paper are wrong and we do not build the desal plant at this time, we will continue to have a water crisis here on the peninsula and a desal plant that will cost much more in the future. Realizing nothing is simple, I'm going to throw out a bunch of large numbers and break them down as easy as I can. CalAm is allowed to legally pump 3,376 acres a year of water, but we are pumping 8,310 a year right now. We therefore need to replace about 5,000 acre feet of water just to meet the demand right now. And if Pure Water Monterey can produce 5,750 acre feet, this means that we have an extra leftover amount of 816 acres for everything else. If I can just take one of the paper's erroneous assumptions, the current customer demand, and to talk about that, I'll show you that we do need a desal plant because the paper states that the demand has not increased and will not increase. But conservation has been so stringent and we have been working so hard to conserve that there's no way that that can continue in a manner that will stop the pumping from the Carmel River. We have an endangered species that we need to provide water for. Recently, the Salinas Valley Groundwater Basin Sustainability Agency presented the plan for the 180-foot and 400-foot aquifer, which includes Marina. During this meeting, they mentioned that households use 3.36 acre feet of water. The peninsula uses 0.21 acre feet per household. There are around 4,000 residential customers in the CalAm service area, and if they just raise their water consumption by 0.05 acre feet to an average of 0.6 acre feet, we'll be well below what our friends in the Salinas Valley use, and we would need near 2,000 acre feet of water just to fill that need. Because we only have a water surplus of 816 acre feet, remember, we will have a shortfall of 1,184 acre feet. And we would be in the worse shape than we are now, which is forced conservation, potential water rationing, a building moratorium. I'm sick and tired of the lack of water in the Monterey Peninsula, and over the years we were told not to worry because the district will build a dam. That didn't happen. CalAm will build a dam, but that didn't happen. Don't worry because we'll take water from the Central Valley Project, or we can build an off-site storage, we can build a desal plant near the postgraduate school, but none of these have happened, and we've seen them fail time and time again. So if I can just ask, if we're protecting species here, why not protect the steelhead and the Carmel River that have been pumped for the last 30 years dry? Thank you.
My name is Sam Teal. I've been a resident of Monterey Peninsula and City Grove for about 40 years. And I've been in business there for that long. And I honestly can't remember a time in that 40 years that we weren't under some kind of water restriction. And it was almost always a supply, and then it was a storage, and then we should build a dam, and we didn't. And then we got a chance at a desal, and we didn't do that either. And now we're looking at finally a desal plant that actually, I have hope, will actually relieve the water problem once and for all. The commission staff did a study and relied heavily on a report by Mr. Stoltz, the water managing district. Those numbers that he used are, being fair, unreliable. They're somewhat fictitious in my mind. And it's inexplicable that those numbers could be used in their flawed nature to say, okay, we don't need the desal plant. We have another project here that can take care of the problem. You know, it's doubtful that it can. And in the next 30 some odd years, it's almost unbelievable that we won't have some kind of severe drought. If you don't have new water coming into the system from somewhere, you can't recycle it. That's pretty simple. That's the way it is. Any plan that ignores some of these realities and goes ahead and says, okay, we don't need a supply of water. We can rely on recycling of water that may not even be there, could really do a lot of damage. I hope you take that in consideration when you make your final decision. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Sean Coleman, and I'd like to thank the Coastal Commission for having us all here today. And I just wanted to say that I understand that Redwood City uses recycled water in their parks and golf courses, and that might be a good first step for Monterey if they're not already doing it. And I think that a desalination plant could be a good idea for Monterey. Thank you.
I'm Dale Huss with Oceano Farms.
Okay.
We're based in Castroville, California. We have approximately 1,500 employees involved in bringing our crops to market. Many employees live between Salinas and Castroville. I also serve as the chair of the Water Quality and Operations Committee for the Monterey County Water Recycling Projects, and I served on the TAC for the Monterey Peninsula Water Authority. I find it interesting. I listen to these folks from Marina, and I farmed out there just north of Marina, on both sides of the highway, and those aquifers. And both the 180 and 400 are true. Now this dune aquifer they're talking about, they're not going to get any water from that. If I was in Marina, I'd be more concerned about all these deep wells going on around them, because they're going to be the ones that are most likely to jeopardize their water. We support and ask the Commission to approve the slant well desal project. It's what's needed to ensure the long-term water supply for the peninsula, along with inland waters of Bench Street and recharge and storage. Now, the thing that folks need to remember, I mean, this is something here you should find out, is just this expansion of the advanced treatment plant. Where are they going to get that water from? Is there a guarantee for that? There is not a guarantee for that water. That's coming from the Salinas Valley. They're expecting that industrial wastewater to be there, and it may not be. I guarantee you, those processing plants are looking at ways to recycle that water. I guarantee you that the growers that are on the Blanco drain and the wreck ditch are looking at ways to use that water. And so let's find out just how that all adds into the situation. But finally, after serving on the TAC, and we've all heard of the the lettuce curtain. This has been voiced before, but I honestly, after being involved in water issues, believe it to be true. And there's a water curtain. And a water curtain is a sediment that's, okay, when you work over here, but we don't want you to live over here. That's been said more than once. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Pete Scudder, past chair of the current board member of Monterey County Business Council. I also previously submitted a personal letter to the Peninsula Commission regarding this topic. For close to 30 years, I've witnessed an ongoing saga and politicized our water crisis. And for 30 years, nothing has been done. The Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project, Desal, is not only critical to help mitigate the environmental damage that has been caused by pumping the aquifers in our area, it's also crucial to have a reliable, viable water source to make sure we provide clean, safe, viable water sources for citizens and businesses of our community. Just in hospitality alone, there's over 22,000 jobs. These positions rely on a reliable and affordable water source, not to mention all the other major businesses and industries that adversely affect water sources. Water gives us sustained lives. Water drives prosperity. There are over 120 countries and over 21,000 desal plants in operation today. Many of these are third world countries. Why not us? Thank you.
Kevin Dayton, Government Affairs Liaison for the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. I've heard very little said here about how the water shortage in the Monterey Peninsula discourages the construction of affordable housing. I've heard nothing said about how a T-zone shop on Alvarado Street has to fight to even open because of water credits and a shortage of them. I've heard nothing about how the military bases being closed in this area and that water supply issues are a major concern of the Department of Defense on this. I've heard nothing about population contraction and how the population of Monterey has been in decline for almost 30 years and even declined last year. The disappearance of middle-class families. This desalination plant needs to be built so that there's an adequate supply of water for the future of the Monterey Peninsula. And this is something that matters to the entire state as a precedent. Please build this, allow this plant to be built.
My name is Bill Camp, former mayor of the city of Pacific Grove, and we need this water. The staff report relies heavily on a new supply and demand forecast from the Water Management District to say this project is not needed and there is a better alternative for 25 years. I submit this alternative is valid for only a few years. The forecast underestimates future demand based on at least two doubtful assumptions. First assumption, water allocation growth pre-CEO represents unconstrained water demand. In the city of Pacific Grove in that period, we had a water waiting list that in 10 years accumulated 43 projects. Nothing moved. Throughout the peninsula, demand was suppressed by water poverty. Second assumption, the forecast uses the Marina as a basis for projecting future needs. I served on the AMBAG board for 10 years and a recent term as president. The Marina, in fact, for the peninsula is suppressed specifically because of lack of water on a state-ordered basis. And that, by the way, is in the Marina document, and I included that in the letter that I sent to you. Consequences. Actually, the staff report will lead to joy and comfort for a lot of folks who would like to kind of nestle into a cozy sense of 1970. What it doesn't do is allow the peninsula to do its fair share part of providing housing for the growing population in the state of California, or the necessary hosting capability for that same growing population and their desire to visit our coastline. I really urge you to reconsider the staff report and give us a possibility of creating the future that I believe we are in fact obligated to create as leaders and do our fair share for the state. Thank you very much.
John Garigi, founder, Coalition of Peninsula Businesses. 10 years ago, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. I'm going to talk a little about history and what I consider to be reality. As you are aware, the CPUC, the lead agency, after numerous years of study, staff, and independent professionals and state local agencies, and sworn testimony by various parties, they unanimously voted for the water supply project by CalAm. Several parties were included in that: the Coalition, the Mayor's Authority, Monterey Peninsula Water Management, Pure Water Monterey, the Land Watch, Surfrider, Planning and Conservation League, and others all agreed that the CalAm water supply project as submitted to the CPUC was the one. As the practice has been for the last 40 years on our peninsula, once again the legal challenges began, and those who were a part of the original agreement have now come up with yet another alternative or more opinions. Marina Coastal Water District independently has filed 5 legal challenges against this project. 2 against this agency, and 1 against the CPUC, and 1 against the County of Monterey. All have been lost in Marina Coast, and 1 was settled. City of Marina also filed a lawsuit against the CPUC. The Supreme Court in that case denied Marina's position upholding the certified EIR and the CPU's decision. The Mayor's Authority and other participating parties attempted to work with Marina and Marina Coast, holding 4 all-day meetings to find some common ground. Nothing happened. In closing, I want to urge you to take a hard look at this project, and I do appreciate you taking the time and not accepting the report today from your staff. After 10 years, the pure water expansion that will be based on the wastewater from the ag community is not the answer to our problem. If we could, we would put the slant wells on a Peninsula beach, but this commission right here is the one that required the slant wells and required them to be where they are today.
Commissioners, Dan Limestad, I'm one of the directors of Community Hospital of Monterey Peninsula, part of Montage Health, and members of the Coalition of Peninsula Businesses, as well as Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. So I'm here to ask for your support of the Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project. While we support the 3-pronged approach of ASR, GWR, and Desal, only one of these 3 has guaranteed long-term water supply, no matter how long the future droughts occur, and that's Desal. Montage Health is the only health system primarily responsible for meeting the healthcare needs of the Monterey Peninsula residents. It's also the largest non-governmental employer on the peninsula with over 2,400 employees. We've submitted a letter for your consideration. I'll just add a few extra words. To meet the changing healthcare needs, hospitals today, they're not as focused on building inpatient bed capacity versus building various outpatient access points of care like urgent care or primary care clinics in order to keep people healthier and avoid more costly visits or admissions to the hospital. These outpatient solutions are changing rapidly. Today, as in the past, Montage has property without allocated water due to the water hookup moratorium. The result of this is that we end up being less nimble to address these rapidly changing healthcare needs. Montage Health also has had to jump into the housing market because of the critical shortage and high cost of available housing, which is complicated by insufficient water supply. We found it necessary to develop short-term housing for caregivers, difficult to recruit and retain, and that includes physicians. After more than 40 years, we must solve our water shortage problem once and for all, and not just to satisfy the CDO requirement, but also for existing lots of record, modest growth, and our required requirement for new housing. I urge you to support the water supply project. Thank you very much.
My name is Phyllis Muir. I'm a former city council member in the city of Salinas and also a former board member of the Monterey County Water Resources Agency Board of Directors. As you proceed on this issue, I see 3 key considerations. Number 1, the Weiss Groundwater Report states on page 3 in its summary of findings, quote, potential project impacts on groundwater quantity and quality can be reduced by extending the planned well field intakes seaward, end quote. That would certainly be better than starting over. Number 2, Mr. Stoltz's supply and demand report should not be relied on. It has a baffling set of assumptions and very questionable conclusions. His numbers have had no vigorous examination and must be treated accordingly. A full review of the rebuttals to Mr. Stoltz's report must be done by your staff and be made available to the public. Number 3, most critically, Pure Water Monterey expansion would depend on source waters that could disappear through changes in ag technology and competition from Salinas Valley as they prepare their state-mandated sustainability plan. Indeed, the Salinas Valley plan has as one of its priority projects increasing use of recycled water for ag uses in the Castroville area. I guarantee you, there will be competition for the limited source water available for recycling. This is clearly a very intense issue for many people. Many people take it personally, but your decision must be based on the facts.
My name is Dr. David Henderson. I'm a 35-year resident of the Monterey Peninsula and an emeritus professor of economics. I support allowing the Monterey Peninsula water supply project. In less than 26 months, we will lose access to a large part of our water supply from the Carmel River. Without this project, we will have to cut our amount of usage, and we have already cut it to the bone. It's true that if we get a lot of rainfall, the desal will be, should I pause or we good?
No, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
It's organizing this.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's right, thanks. If it's true that if we get a lot of rainfall, the desal will be less needed. But you need only know a little bit about rain patterns in the Monterey Peninsula to know that we can't depend on high rainfall or even medium rainfall. For years, we in the Monterey community have faced stringent restrictions on our water supply. We are one of the most water-conserving regions in California, and even with that conservation, residents are not allowed to add a bathroom or convert a business if that new use would require more water. If we get desal, local governments will be able to lift restrictions on new water connections, and that will benefit people in Monterey and people in California more generally. I want to address two more points, and that is, when friends ask me for advice on finance, I say it's the D word, diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. We need a diversified water supply. The most straightforward way to get that is with desal. Also, people have kind of knocked profits. Profits are a return to capital, and capital isn't money. Capital is plant and equipment. Whoever owns this thing needs profit, even if you don't call it that. They need a return to capital. So I urge you to support the surest way of expanding the water supply. Allow the desal to be built. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joe Desmond. I'm a resident of Monterey and the Executive Director of Sustainable Agriculture and Energy, or SAGE. SAGE is a coalition of stakeholders in Monterey County that advocate for vibrant and sustainable rural communities. I'm here in support of CalAm's slant wells permit request. I represent key concerned stakeholders in the agricultural industry across Monterey County and consider this issue from their perspective. The peninsula is in a housing crisis that is self-inflicted. That crisis is spread inland as housing is either unaffordable or unavailable for the peninsula's workforce, pushing farm workers and employees out of their homes and further inland as well. We understand that one of the greatest barriers to housing of any kind along the peninsula is water supply. By approving CalAm's slant wells permit and by extension the desalination plan, you're providing a considerable, dependable water source for the peninsula today and for future generations. We ask that you approve these wells and support a pathway to more housing for our workers, families, and communities. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm James Cole, former Executive Director of the Monterey Peninsula Regional Water Authority. The Water Authority is a joint powers authority formed in 2012 by the 6 peninsula cities receiving water from CalAm. Its purpose is to create a unified community position with respect to a new water supply project or projects through a public process, ensuring transparency, governance, and accountability. Since 2012, the Water Authority Board, comprised of the city mayors, adopted a policy position which insisted upon a portfolio of water projects, eliminating undue reliance upon any one source. Unfortunately, the sad lesson we learned from the Carmel River. Accordingly, the board supported and has supported since 2012 the following new water projects: a desalination facility of 6.4 million gallons a day approximately, a groundwater replenishment project, which is now referred to as a water recycle project for Monterey Water with a capacity of 3.5 million gallons a day, and an expanded aquifer storage and recovery project. Along with CalAm's rights on the Carmel River and reduced draws from the seaside aquifer and several other small water sources, the community would then have adequate and diversified is an important word, sources of water. The community's need for a total of 12,000 acre-feet per year with a peak capacity of 14,000 acre-feet per year is well documented, and it is the demand level established by sworn testimony for the CPUC. New guesstimates of future demand have not yet been as well scrutinized or analyzed. There will always be a new study with allegedly new information, always a new and better mousetrap. And there'll always be lots of reasons to stop a project so the community can suffer again another round of paralysis by analysis. CalAm and the community have done everything demanded by state agencies, including testing the slant belt technology. Measures to address the concerns of Marina residents and to mitigate any harm are required by the CPUC. I strongly urge the Commission to issue a coastal development permit for the slant belts quickly and allow CalAm to move forward with the Desal project in compliance with CDO 2016-60.
And that concludes our public comment, and I want to take a little round of applause. I want to thank all of you for behaving so nicely and speaking from your heart, but also without a lot of drama. So now we have the rebuttal period for, I believe, Mr. Moore.
Good evening, Commissioners. DJ Moore again from Latham & Watkins on behalf of California American Water. Just a few points I wanted to make to just clear up some misconceptions that arose during some of the testimony today. First, CalAm isn't standing in the way of the Pure Water Monterey expansion. CalAm contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars to fund the expansion plans, SEIR, that was just released last week. CalAm is not opposed to that project. It just wants the facts developed, and they're being developed. The evidence shows, though, that even if that project is ultimately viable, the supply is insufficient. CalAm is also not refusing to sign a water purchase agreement. No one has presented a water purchase agreement to CalAm yet for that project. There are concerns over the certainty of source water. You heard that from the Monterey One Water Board members who testified to you today, and those are also going to need to be explored with Monterey One Water. There's been some misconception of rates. Unfortunately, there's some misinformation being shared with Marina residents suggesting that their rates are going to go up as a result of this project. That is not correct. Many have correctly stated that Marina is not receiving water from this project. That means that Marina water rates are not going up as a result of this project, and I wanted to make that clear. Also, the project is not stealing Marina's water. Marina is in a different subbasin from the project except for the CEMEX site, and their wells draw from a different aquifer than the project's wells draw from. The claims of access impacts are also not accurate. Lots of numbers were thrown around about the impact area on the CEMEX site, but the simple fact is that once the project is completed, a quarter acre of this 400 acre site is going to be fenced for the wells. There are no paved roads. This project doesn't propose other above grade improvements on that site. Some speakers are trying to have it both ways. On the one hand, they're arguing that the entire site should be pristine ESHA, so under the Coastal Act, they're arguing essentially that it shouldn't be developed. On the other hand, they're arguing that it should be all open for public access, and that a quarter acre of permanent disturbance from CalAm is going to prevent public access on 400 acres. The fact is, those aren't particularly reconcilable positions, and ultimately, CalAm's impacts on this 400 acre site are minimal. The outfall liner was discussed at the beginning of the presentation by Marina Coast. That work was already analyzed as part of the CPUC's EIR, so there's no piecemealing. Monterey One Water owns the facility and will be applying for a permit for a bunch of work associated with their facility. It also will include the outfall liner. One important point that I wanted to make as well is that the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency is proposing wells along this region of the coast to halt seawater intrusion, very similar to the project's wells. That's based on the best available science. And this project, like those wells, is not going to cause seawater intrusion, it's going to help halt seawater intrusion. And don't be surprised if this site ever becomes available, that Marina Coast isn't back here proposing the exact same kind of desal project on this exact same site, despite all of the groundwater impacts that they're claiming now. Marina Coast Chair publicly said on October 28th that they would build a desal project if it becomes necessary. Lastly, Marina Coast is claiming that CalAm can't use a 1.8 mile shared pipeline that Marina Coast currently puts no water through as an effort to thwart this project. CalAm has a legal right to use that pipeline and will continue to assert that legal right. It could also feasibly and easily build a parallel pipeline. It's in a public street. It would have minimal impacts and involve minimal construction time. So I just wanted to clarify that factually as well. Finally, there was a comment that the independent hydrogeologist didn't review the AEM study. I don't believe that is correct. He did, and this is the Commission's independent hydrogeologist, and he concluded that there was no new information from the AEM study that was not considered in the EIR. He also concluded that the project would not exacerbate seawater intrusion. He estimated that the worst case scenario is that the project draws 85% seawater, and likely that ratio is actually much higher, over 90%. We appreciate your time today. I know it's been a long day, and we look forward to working with staff and the staff of other resource agencies to address many of the issues that have been raised. Thank you very much for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you. Bring it back to staff. Hi.
I just had very few words. Just a reminder that because you are not making a decision today, you will, believe it or not, be getting more information about this project and information and testimonies. So please focus your comments today on clarifying questions and identifying information that you would like staff to investigate before it comes back to you again. It is important that you do not prejudge your decision, and that you do not deliberate today.
Madam Chair, just a few concluding thoughts from us, and I just want to share the Commission, the public, and the applicant that staff will follow the facts here, sound science, the law, and also just a good dose of common sense in formulating our next staff recommendation. We'll be conducting a thorough analysis of the technical questions and issues identified by the CPUC and the State Water Board, and the issues we heard in testimony today, presented both in testimony and also in the correspondence that we received today. And that includes additional analysis of the groundwater hydrology questions, including the AEM geophysical study. And we understand that the stakes are really high here, and it's important we get this right. And we land on that alternative that provides a reliable, sustainable water supply that is the environmentally preferred and the environmentally just alternative that is fully consistent with the coastline. So that is our charge, and that's our goal, and I assure you that's what we're going to do. So I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So I'm certain we'll have questions. I think I'll just do it by going down the dais this way. Commissioner Mon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, everyone. Okay, so I'll just share just a couple of quick questions for staff. The first one has to do with locations, and so in terms of this being a marina, specifically with Marina, what we've heard has been what will be the impacts on Marina and what will be the benefit of Marina, but just more discussion in terms of the other possible locations for the facility. The other one has to do with the rates. We received some information that based on, so there was discussion about the amounting capacity of the plant and what would be produced, but we also have some information here that talks about the cost per acre foot at 86% capacity, and the capacity drops, the cost rises. And so curious about with the likely production of the plant, what do we think the cost will be in that situation if the capacity that is being drawn is actually lower than what CalAm is predicting? Would we be closer to some of these rates which are get into the 8,000 per acre feet range? And I'll just leave it that there for now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few quick questions as well. The first one's on water quality and brine discharge. And I read in the staff report, it looks like there will be times where there won't be sufficient wastewater, perhaps any wastewater, to mix with the brine discharge. Potentially, I think there's up to 100% brine discharge. I'm pretty familiar with the Desal plant, which does use seawater to mix discharge, to basically diffuse and dilute the discharge. And I'm curious here, do you have any idea of where that extra water flow will come from, and would it be additional flows pulled from the slant wells in addition to the water supplies? I'll just again put that on the record. I look forward to answer that. The other question I have is two, but the other one's procedural. I just want to make sure I get this correct. If we agree, let's say the commission agrees that the project is inconsistent with the act as it relates to ESHA, water quality, and hazards, then I understand the only way we can approve the project is if it meets the three tests, each of the three tests in 30267 and 30233. And at that point, is it fair to say that our decision is no longer discretionary, that we were then directed by the act to deny the permit if we find that pure water is a feasible expansion within a reasonable time? That's another question that we have. And then finally, I just want to clarify that the question, the pure water expansion, it seems like in the staff report has construction deadline anticipated to come into compliance before the CDO deadline, that our finding that the project is feasible within a reasonable time frame is not driven by that CDO deadline as well. So those are my questions. Again, in the interest of time, don't need to answer now, but I'm curious about the answer. Thanks.
Commissioner Rice.
Yeah, I think here my two questions, and they're sort of broad. There were a lot of issues raised by the speakers, especially the local residents from Marina and otherwise, around rates, around impacts to the aquifers, their aquifer, their water source, around, and you've already mentioned, impacts to the ESHA, around, and procedural ones as well. For instance, there's other agencies and there's other jurisdictions that have some authority, not the same as ours, over what happens with this project. So I guess what I would like to have clarified is what issues were raised that are actually kind of irrelevant or outside the scope of what we're considering, just so that the public understands what are the facts we're dealing with versus other issues that may be pertaining to this project but don't fall within the scope of the Commission's authority. And then I think process-wise, I'm a little confused around the role now that the CPUC is playing, and also with what happens with the supplemental EIR. There's a timeline there, I'm sure, with response to comments. It does put new information on the table. Does that impact the CP's decision going forward and or the State Water Board? So just understanding even better the process with regards to those other regulatory bodies and their assessment of this proposal.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brownson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just have a few questions in addition, and I fear that our report's going to double in size, heading from 110 pages right to 220. But first, I just want to say this was an amazing hearing. The comments from the folks, public, and really all the participants, the organizations, I mean, it was extremely, everybody was extremely well stated, and as the chair said, there's no psychodrama. I have to say, this was an extraordinary hearing on a difficult issue, but I really felt like I was being informed the entire day, and right now I feel like I'm hallucinating because I have information in my head that, so these questions may not seem very coherent, but I'm grateful to everybody in this room, I really am, and to all of those on TV. That was great. Okay, so quickly, and I do not want a response today because I'm not sure that I could even understand it, but one of the things, just quickly, and I'm going to go on some of the other questions from some of the other commissioners, if we could just understand a little bit about the technology on the slant wells, not in extreme detail, but the assertion that there could be data that's missing that could impact the ecology of those aquifers, and how that would work with respect to slant wells for the purposes of desal, and then how that works for the related question to me is the use of the Salinas aquifer and the water that's going to be the source of the recycling. Is it in fact just interior water, or are there drought conditions that could stress that system? Just a little more detail with respect to how these really do impact those aquifers. Also, a little more detail separately, but I think incredibly importantly, was one of the facts that really got my attention was the 2017 study where the CalAm water rates for their community were among the highest out of a survey of 500 public and private companies. And how does water conservation and the reduction of use, it has the unintended consequence of often increasing the price of water, particularly when projects are trying to be penciled out. So the economics of how that works and how that impacts the community. And I'd really like to understand, why are those water rates so high? And maybe I missed that in the report, but especially for this community, I was really struck by that. And then, let me see. And then I think one of the other commissioners mentioned this, but this is my last question, to really understand why there's this divergence of views on the water demand analysis, because I really think that's what's driving the decisions that are going to be made around this most important issue. And so again, thank you to staff and thank you to everyone, to the public, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bruin?
Thank you. I wanted to add, it was especially good to hear from the people from Marina through the video. That was really helpful, because I think we did get to a segment of the population that doesn't always come to our meetings. So it was excellent to hear that. I have the same questions as almost everybody. The ones that I'm really very interested in is the procedure. The water board, are they finished with this? PUC? I asked at lunch if anybody knew why the PUC took 6 years to even get the project, and I didn't understand that at all. The rates, I think the rates would really be nice to have a rate chart or a rate analysis. And the other thing that I'm curious about is the impact on agriculture. I mean, agriculture plays a big part in the Coastal Act. And so we've heard that whether the ag will have enough water or not enough water, or it will be variable. So I'd like to know a little bit about that. And I think everybody else's questions are close on my list too. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hart?
Thank you. I just want to second how incredible it was. And thank you to Billy and all of you having people testify from Marina, and everyone here. It was incredible. I just have 2 questions. My question has to go with the pure water. My first question is with regard to the Pure Water Monterey board and their position, and I'd like more information on the justification for their position, more of an understanding about whether there is some issue with their actually being able to provide the water that we are indicating will be available and base our whole, frankly, our full report on. That remains confusing to me, and I went back and went through all of the exhibits, etc., and it's still unclear to me, and it's really been bothering me. Number two, I really need to resolve in my own mind this issue that was brought up just now by attorney for CalAm versus what everyone's been talking about all day. What is the mechanism as the slant wells, if the slant wells are pulling water, to what extent do they pull fresh water in, and what basin or basins is that coming from, and really a true analysis, a definitive analysis, as much as we can have between now and March, on the impact on Marina's water. Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Escobar.
Thank you. I'll add that I appreciate the public's comments. I agree with all of you. It was probably one of the most constructive meetings, controversial meetings that I've been to thus far, and I'm especially grateful now, and well, you know, quite honestly, it got a bit emotional, especially to be here today. It was a historical day to be able to connect by video to a community that who had otherwise been totally cut off from access and participating, and from having us hear their voices and their perspectives. You know, this is in the spirit and it shows our commitment to the EJ policy, and I am truly proud of our staff in particular for making it happen, so thank you. And I have two questions. I guess I'm really interested in the conservation piece. I think I would like a further analysis. We get talking about portfolios of water supplies, and of course, you know, the cheapest, most reliable water is that one you don't waste and you don't throw away. So I want to kind of that more discussion about that, and maybe how, you know, the region, or I don't know how we want to break it up in terms of whether it's CalAm service area, if there's more room for conservation. There was legislation that was passed in the past session, SB 606 if I'm not wrong, and AB 1668, and how sort of this area is going along with that. And lastly, I noticed when I was looking at the map, you know, obviously this is a marine sanctuary, but it's also between two marine protected areas, the Alcorn Slough and the Pacific Road and the Silmar area. So I wanted to sort of have a little better understanding from the state agencies that manage these protected areas, if there's any concerns or impacts in these particular ones. Thank you for being for that. You know, we protecting those pieces of ocean protects us from sea level rise and climate change impacts. So that is important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions, gentlemen? On my left? Go right ahead, Commissioner Gold.
First of all, I just wanted to thank everybody for their patience, their perseverance, and their professionalism. I know, having been where you're seated in my previous career, I know how trying it can be to sit through one of these, you know, nobody lost it, which is pretty amazing for something that's really this intense with this much at stake. So I just want to acknowledge that. And pretty good first meeting, I guess. It's just the norm, right? And so there was a bunch of questions. I'm not going to get into detail. I think I'm going to deal a little bit more with staff, but just to sort of round out some of the things that had been brought up, and there'll be other ones I'll bring up later, is that really trying to reconcile the differences in the demand estimates is a really big deal. And so I think we're going to need that fleshed out a little more, because the difference between 10,000 acre feet and 14,000 acre feet per year is pretty much what's the solution to the problem. And so, so really understanding that better. And then the other thing, which was brought up on numerous occasions and sort of thumbing through the EIR and didn't really find enough on it, is just a much better understanding on what the source water would be for the pure water expansion and how reliable that is, and whether or not all of the wastewater in the region is really taken into account. Is that all, and just out of my own ignorance, is that all going to Monterey Wind Water, or is there some available that could be used as source water? There's stuff like that that just really trying to do a water balance that's just not quite there. And that would be helpful as well. And I'll follow up with some of the questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Did I miss anybody? Okay, well, thank you so much. And really, staff, I'm going to be a big proponent in the future for these kinds of hearings where we do get an opportunity to listen to all sides. I know it's lengthy, I know it's tiring, but it does give us so much information that by the next hearing, or I'm sure we'll get even more, I feel very confident that we'll be able to make a decision without, a lot of strum and drum. So anyway, thanks again to everyone, and I think that will conclude this part of our hearing, and we'll continue it. Is that the proper? We'll continue it and close it for this evening until we hear it again. And thank you again, everyone.